Good afternoon and welcome to the Bushveld Minerals Limited Investor Update. Throughout this recorded update, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all the questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Craig Coltman, CEO. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon and welcome to our operational update for Q4 and full year ended 31 December 2023. Thank you for joining. I'm pleased to begin by saying that we have met 2023 production guidance, and I'd like to commend our team for achieving the level of operational performance in H2 2023, particularly given the challenges we have faced as a company. I'm also extremely pleased to state that we have just last week, on the 1st of February, announced the completion of the Orion convertible debt restructuring of $47 million. While this is a very positive step for Bushveld, I'm very disappointed that we've had to suspend guidance for 2024 owing to the SPR funding shortfall. This was reported in our recent announcements to the market. Once this funding has been received and production is again stable across all operations, we will look to update our shareholders and stakeholders accordingly, providing our updated guidance. But let's return to 2023 numbers. Over the course of the year, Bushveld achieved group production of 3,714 mtV in line with guidance. Q4 contributed 925 mtV to this total. Sales for the quarter were up at 1,106 mtV, above the 849 in the previous quarter, and we're up across for the full year at 4,051 mtV as we sold down on inventory. Production of 589 mtV for the quarter at Vametco was impacted by constraints at the Barren Dam, as well as the salt recovery plant, reliability challenge at the leach plant, and cash flow shortfalls. For these same reasons, we saw a reduced full-year production of 2,306 mtV and resulting higher costs for the quarter of $26.40 per kilogram, offset partially by weaker rand-dollar exchange rate. Full-year costs at Vametco of $25.5 per kilogram were up relative to 2022, owing to lower volumes. To move on to Vanchem, the 12-month period saw an increase in production at 1,408 mtV, supported by the turnaround initiative that was implemented in H2 2023. I'm pleased to say that this has been the highest yearly production achieved by Vanchem since it was acquired by Bushveld. As a result of the increased production, cash costs for the year were down at $27.90 per kilogram, with the Q4 costs at $26.80 per kilogram. Production for Q4 was down quarter on quarter at 336 metric ton volume, owing to cash flow challenges and stoppages, including the kiln reline maintenance shutdown, which was brought forward given ongoing refractory issues at the plant. While I can't yet give any comment on the 24 guidance, we are factoring in a planned maintenance shutdown at Vametco in both Q1 for 25 days and Q3 for 10 days, in addition to scheduling a 23-day annual maintenance shutdown at Vanchem during the course of Q2 this year. Our safety improvement program has shown its effect in the reduced total injury frequency rate of 2.31 over the course of 2023, and we will continue to focus on optimizing safety at all our operations. On the vanadium market, we have seen a slide in pricing in Q4 relative to Q3. As we have noted before, we continue to prioritize sales to the higher value markets, including aerospace sector, alloys, and the chemical industry. In 2023, we met our target guidance. We have now completed our refinancing with Orion, and we are working with our partners to deliver stability and consistency for the year ahead. I would like to welcome Robbie Taylor, who joins us as a non-board interim CFO. Robbie brings with him over 27 years of experience as a finance executive in various sectors. He has extensive experience working with listed entities and multinationals. The board and the Bushveld executive team are looking forward to working closely with Robbie while we now commence the search for a permanent finance director. Before I pause for questions, I'd like to use the opportunity with you to share my reflection on the SPR deal. This happened on my watch, and I take accountability for this. But I've never, ever witnessed anything like this before. And I've done a lot of deals in my life like this. I reflect when SPR came to see us in September, maybe end of August last year. And they really liked what they saw around the turnaround initiative at Vanchem. And that was actually what prompted the deal. That's the primary attraction to them. They were very excited about Vanchem. They knew that we needed short-term bridging finance, particularly to address the long outstanding creditors. And it didn't take that long to put an agreement together for them to come up with $8 million, and they paid promptly. So at that point in time, there was no alarms, all green lights. When we signed the binding term sheet, clearly a due diligence was done on the respective individuals as part of a governance process, and the green lights were given on those individuals. At that point in time, no alarms. We had a very detailed, integrated project plan where we sat every single week, and I was in every one of those meetings with a range of lawyers, stakeholders from Orion, SPR, my management team, making sure that the milestones were delivered. And whilst there was some slippage, not through want of trying, we still had the binding agreement for this deal signed on the 5th of December. At that point in time, no alarms. The EGM went ahead on the 27th, favorable outcome. We were expecting the money immediately. The money wasn't forthcoming. We had numerous meetings with the board, with SPR, as to what was the result of this delay. The message we were giving is it was an administrative issue. They mistimed it. It was the festive season. Whilst I was concerned, I wasn't overly worried at that point in time. I really got worried on the first few working days into January when there was no money forthcoming. On the 5th of January, we received a letter via SPR from the asset management company where there was a binding agreement between SPR and the asset management company, clearly stating it was an administrative issue and that the funds would flow by the 8th of January. In that letter, signed by the executive director, there was an agreed commitment for the $12.5 million equity subscription. Nothing materialized. Now we were getting really, really worried. On the 9th of January, we got a second letter signed by the same executive director saying that there were just a few outstanding signatures required and that the full funds would flow by the end of the week. Well, we know what's happened since then. So when I reflect on this, I often think about what could I have done differently. Not a hell of a lot, I don't believe. In a perfect world, you get the money into escrow, but they would never have agreed to that in the agreement when we put the binding term sheet together. So it's been extremely disappointing, and we've been in constant negotiation with SPR. They have now committed to come up with the funds themselves, and they've provided us with $2 million about 2 weeks back as an interest-free loan towards the $12.5 million equity. I must add, it's a non-refundable interest-free loan, which gives me some comfort that if they don't come up with the rest, they lose that. Doesn't sound like a smart plan on their side. So I play this through my mind time and time again. I've never experienced anything like this in my life, but I just thought I'd share with you that reflection. Alexander, I think we can pause now and take questions.
Perfect, Craig. Thank you very much for the update. We have received a number of pre-submitted questions here, Craig, and I thought I'd start off the Q&A session with these. The first one here reads as follows. Do you have a fallback position if the SPR money doesn't come in?
We've received the $2 million I spoke about early from SPR. We're expecting to receive the remaining balance of $10.5 million by the end of this month. We are continuously engaging with SPR regularly, as well as exploring other options for the business in the event of further delays.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any penalties outlined in the SPR agreement for late payment?
I mean, we are monitoring the situation very closely and in constant discussion with SPR. As previously announced, we've issued SPR with at least 2 letters of demand that they are in breach and that we reserve our rights, which entitles us to seek specific performance and or damages against SPR.
Thank you. Just turning to the next question. Have there been any updates regarding the progress of electrolyte shipments to potential customers?
Yeah, we gave an update in the Q4 operational update. Belco's electrolyte has been successfully qualified by 3 international battery companies and is in the qualification process with a few others. And we're in discussions with companies on possible supply contracts. That is about as much as I can say. Thank you.
Perfect. The next question here reads as follows. Is there a projected date by which BUSHVELD would be compelled to enter administration if the SPR funding is not received promptly, leading to insufficient funding?
We're working very hard not to get into such a position. We're engaging with SPR regularly, as well as exploring other options for the business in the event of further delays. That's about as much as I can say at the moment, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you still looking to purchase more shares in the company, Craig? This would give your shareholders a boost knowing that you're aligned with them.
The answer is yes, but let me elaborate a little. I've mentioned previously I committed to 4 months' worth of my proceeds from the BUSHVELD salary to acquire shares within the business. I've already acquired a portion of this. However, at the moment, I'm not able to purchase due to the stock exchange regulations. As soon as I'm able to do so, I'll buy more shares. I mean, there was a perfect plan. The plan was to acquire more shares in early January, but with SPR's default and failure to deliver, that's no longer possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a substantial existing supply of slag at BUSHVELD that can be quickly used to supply Vanchem?
No, there isn't. Vanchem is currently using ore from a third party.
Okay, thank you very much. How far SPR along the road to opening BUSHVELD?
The time frame will be driven by SPR, of course. Our understanding in terms of the feedback they've given us that it'll take 18 months before the plant is back online.
Thank you very much. What obstacles and time frames are there in place to get Mokopan supplying ore to BUSHVELD?
Again, similar, the time frame will be driven by SPR once their acquisition is completed.
Thank you very much. What timescale is expected for the Belco plant to be fully operational, supplying customers with electrolyte after samples have now been sent? And as and when the battery storage economy improves, will expansion of Belco be considered to meet demand?
From the design, Belco's plant was designed to ramp up in terms of its production volume. We'll be in a better position to provide more information on the scale once we've secured some long-term contracts.
Thank you very much, Craig. Why is the company so constrained in January, given that it received $8.1 million from SPR and another $6 million in the fundraise? Please, can there be an explanation of the cash burn from end of September to now?
Yeah, thank you. It's a fair question. It's a good question. The $8.1 million we received from SPR was used predominantly to service long outstanding creditors in September as the operations generated severe negative cash flows in the first half of the year, which resulted in creditors not being paid or settled on time. At that point, the creditors' aging was such that more than a third of our creditors' aging was outstanding for more than 90 days. That $8 million we received was used majority, not all, but the majority, to go and resolve the long outstanding creditors more than 90 days. I must add, we didn't receive $6 million. We received probably 4.5, because of the 18.5 we've received so far, 2.5 million of the equity raise we've got. That's from Orange Trust, the directors in the primary bid. The company's received the other $2 million. That's the interest-free loan out of the $12.5 million, with a balance expected at the end of February. The $2 million interest-free loan we received, we used in January largely to settle some long outstanding creditors balances and make a contribution to much needed raw material purchases in January. And of course, the company will be receiving Ocasia's funds of $3.5 million at the end of February.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Craig. Does the company have any view on vanadium prices? There seems to be no upward pressure on prices despite a number of positive predictions. Where is the competition coming from that is keeping prices low?
The general near-term view from various research houses is that any price downside from where we are now is very limited, and the vanadium price will rebound over the next few months. Much of this will depend on the effectiveness of China's economic stimulus measures, of course, and the impact of the struggling domestic construction sector. What we have seen is December was really low. We've seen a very, very marginal flat, mostly in January. So that rebound hopefully will come soon. We haven't seen a further diminish in price in January versus what we experienced in December.
Thank you very much. Being honest, does the company realistically expect to receive the outstanding monies from the last equity fundraise? If so, in what timescale and why?
We've received the $2.5 million from Orange Trust directors in the primary bid. We've now received the $2 million interest-free loan out of the $12.5 million, with a balance we still expect the end of February. We've got something in writing that SPR have said they've now committed to resolving this and funding by the end of February. As previously announced, we're going to get the balance from Acacia funding by the end of February.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Craig. And maybe just following on from that, how likely is the company to seek a further fundraise in the short term, i.e. in the next 3 months?
Look, assuming we receive the entire equity raise as planned, we do not expect to tap into the equity market in the near term.
That's great. That's great, Craig. Can Craig expand any more on the statement in the RNS that Belco has started the process of looking for additional investors in its plant?
Yeah, Belco is looking for additional investors to invest in the project and assist with the project's financial needs as Bushveld is prioritizing and focusing on its mining assets.
Perfect, Craig. Thank you very much. That is the end of the pre-submitted questions. We have had some live questions come through. There is some repetition there, but I don't know if you just want to have a scan through at this point and take those where appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Over to you, Craig.
Thank you. First question is, what progress is there on the disposal of Lemor and Cellsub shares? Let me deal with Cellsub first. We have signed an agreement with the broker who has been tasked to shortlist potential buyers. That's been done early this year. And they are now soliciting with each of those potential buyers opportunities with a prospectus. That is about as much as I can say. I don't know yet to what extent that's going to bear any fruit, but we'll get an update from the brokers in due course. Lemor, very, very recently, I've got an agreement, which there are conditions to, which has been signed by a consortium. It's sitting with myself at the moment. I've just got board approval for it, and I'm going to sign that agreement based on certain conditions. And as soon as that agreement is signed and those conditions are clear, we'll update the market accordingly. Next question is, where do you see Bushveld in 24 months? Well, let's just start with the proviso that the binding agreements we have with the subscription deal and the sale of Vanchem materialize. That's important to get us to get some traction. And it is also important that the assumptions we have in the next 24 months bear fruit. The per kilogram we've got in the plan for this year. The exchange rate, which we've used 19 Rand to the dollar, which is where we're hovering around. We've used the same in 2025. If all that pans out, we'll be in a really, really good position in 2025. The positive EBITDA based on those assumptions in 2025, with only incremental production input, nothing severe, we'd be in a really, really good position with noticeable, respectable EBITDA, sufficient to cover all capital requirements and some. But for me, what is potentially even more exciting, if you look at any upside on the 25 base, I think I've shared this before, but it's worthwhile doing again. If you take the 2025 base, so that's from now to 18 months' time, if you take a 10% improvement on revenue on that base, you add another $20 million EBITDA onto the free cash flow. And that's through price, just either through exchange rate or price per kilogram, not through increased throughput. If you get increased throughput, you get the equivalent of about $10-11 million free cash flow. I see a world where we've now got sufficient free cash flow after funding our accelerated capex to catch up with the bow wave, where we've got some opportunities to take decisions around respectable dividends or look at expanding some opportunities. For example, Kiln 1 at Vanchem, where I'm told in the heyday could do 100 to 120 MTV. And if you think of 100, 120 MTV, that's 50% on the current throughput at Vanchem with a very small incremental cost. There is one proviso. We've got to make sure that the capital that's required to make that investment is a wise one. So I see a position where we're doing really well, and we're covering more than our requirement for extended cash flow, and we're looking in a position certainly post December 25 at dividends and funding internal capital growth, if those assumptions pan out the way, and there's a very real likelihood they could. I mean, I remind myself and all, a month before I got here, we were running at $40 a kilogram. It's not inconceivable that we could get to that in the early part of 2026. We're a top-line business. I've said this before. We're very revenue sensitive. We're not going to save our way by cost reductions. That doesn't mean to say I'm not going to do that. We've done that at the corporate center. The next step is to move on to Vametco. We've got to make sure we run as tight a ship as possible. But with the throughput that we're seeing in 25 and the potential recovery of the vanadium price, we're in a really good position. I hope that gives some flavor to the question. Does Craig have any organic cash generating solutions instead of relying on further asset sales in the near future? Well, I've covered a little bit of that before. There's no secret. I want to get out of the energy business. I'm not going to put any more money into that. If Belco isn't going to show a remarkable demonstration of takeoff orders soon, I'm not going to put further funds into that neither. The organic growth that I can do is ensuring that I debottleneck some of the constraints that I've got at particular Vametco to get up to the 2.7 million, 2,700 metric tons, and of course some, I think, low-hanging fruit with relatively limited capital injection for Kiln 1 at Vanchem. Currently, what is the biggest risk factor facing Bushveld in 2024? Yeah, that's a very good question. So let's assume we mitigate the risk and we get over the funding issue, and that's all sorted. There are quite a few risks. One is we have an election coming up in South Africa, and you just don't know what ruling party may be in place and what local party might be in charge of various things, licenses, regulation to operate, power supply, etc., etc. If I think of Vanchem's challenges they had with the power supply in H1 2023, that's all been resolved because there's a really good relationship and a really good understanding with the local municipality that we're off the grid. They won't put that in writing, but that's the way authorities in the municipality work. But the relationship is so sound that we have not had one instant where we've been part of the load shedding. So that's a really good position to be in, and I foresee that continuing for a long time. But it's not inconceivable, although I think unlikely. With the change in the ruling party, you could have a change in the local leadership at the municipality, and it's not inconceivable that that relationship could be very different. So there's a risk, I think, of load shedding. I think it's small post elections. Another risk, of course, is the Barren Dam at Vametco. The Barren Dam is full. We just can't evaporate quick enough. We can't build a new one quick enough. We're going to build a new one starting, depending on the funds coming in April, to finish it in December, and then we can, debottleneck the production capacity for 2025. But in the summer months, we largely very, very dependent on the rainfall. I mean, I think we only budgeted about 170 odd thereabout MTV for January at Vametco because we get a lot of rain. So if we get less rain than we plan, we'll do more. If we do more rain than we plan, we do a lot less. So in the rainy season, we're very, very vulnerable for production because you stop production when the dam is full. And we've had 8 days in January where we stopped production, which was more or less in line what we expected. But we can't influence the rainfall. So the first sort of 3-4 months of this year and the last 3 months of the year, we're very vulnerable in terms of rainfall at the Barren Dam. Then I suppose another risk, and I can't quantify the risk until I've done the assurance review, we're spending a lot more money on focused areas in various parts of the value chain, but particularly at the kiln, the leach process, and to some extent the refinery, to get our levels of acid utilization up to acceptable levels. We need to get that kiln up to 80%. I think we did in the order of just below 70% this year. We've got to get it up to 80% to get respectable throughput. Now, the team have done their work. They've provided me with the detail, but I think it's prudent and it's the right thing to do from a governance perspective to get an external assurance review done. That is starting next week. I've got an individual, a grey beard, who has spent many decades on plant in the mining industry. He's been a foreman, he's managed plants, he's been an engineering manager. He's then worked for companies that have built plants. He's done plant optimization. I've got to get that individual in to give me an assurance review that the money being spent on the maintenance is in the right area and we're going to get to the right levels of production. I'm sort of cautiously optimistic that we will, but it's the right thing to do. And then on the capital, we're spending an enormous amount of capital. $20 million this year, the bulk of that, 2/3 of that, at Vametco, the Barren Dam, the buttressing at the Slimes Dam. The same assurance review needs to be done, because if I don't do the Barren Dam properly, I'm not going to debottleneck my production, going forward to have a sustainable business. So this same individual who's a guru in the mining industry for the execution of capital projects has got to provide me with assurance that my capital projects meet the minimum requirement in terms of time, quality, and cost that I can deliver on the requirement for this business. That's a hell of a long story, but I wanted to give you some detailed flavor about the sort of level of detail we're thinking about in terms of the risks. Those are the risks we can control, but of course can influence, shall we say. well, control and influence to an extent. But of course, there's always a risk and an opportunity for the exchange rate and the sales price per kilogram. Those two particularly have a huge impact on our cash flow and EBITDA, and they can go either way. They're very, very sensitive. I think I'll pause there. Those are probably the most significant risks that I think warrant sharing with you. Let's have a look. What is Bushveld's plan to improve share price to reflect true valuation? Well, the first thing I want to say is I can't and I'm not going to mine the share price. I mine vanadium. I believe that most shareholders are smart and they will see the value when the value comes through. And the value will come through when SPR's funding comes through and we demonstrate a few consecutive months of sustainable production delivering positive EBITDA, and we start executing on our planned maintenance and our capital projects. Investors are smart. They'll pick it up and the share price will naturally reflect accordingly. I mentioned earlier about a 10% sensitivity in price. That adds $20 million onto the free cash flow. You know how that reflects as a percentage of EBITDA. The investors will do the assessment themselves and the share price will follow accordingly. There's no more questions I can see on the board.
Perfect, Craig. Thank you very much for answering those questions from investors. And of course, the company can review all the questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors, provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company. Craig, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Yeah, before I forget, let me thank all the investors for their time and listening to me today. I reflect on last year. It was a very, very difficult year for all staff. But we've done the long yards. We've taken the pain. Now we have a plan. I feel as if we're on a runway about to take off, but we don't have enough fuel. It's imperative that SPR come to the party so that we can refuel and take off to start our new journey. I look forward to updating Bushveld shareholders and stakeholders on our progress, in addition to providing an update on guidance for production and costs for 2024 in our Q1 report. I understand the delay is frustrating, and we are actively engaging constructively with SPR, and I hope to have a resolution to the outstanding funds shortly. 4 p.m. South African time is another hour call with SPR. We are pushing them from all angles. I really hope to share something positive with all in an RNS update soon. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Perfect, Craig. Thank you once again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Bushveld Minerals Limited, we'd like to thank you for attending today's update, and good afternoon to you all.